Part 1. The inheritance you never asked for. There's a moment in every spiritual journey, quiet, painful, and unforgettable, when we realize that many of the demons we carry were never ours to begin with. They were passed down through words never said, wounds never healed, and patterns never questioned. You may be sitting in meditation trying to find peace, and suddenly you're flooded with a rage or sadness that feels ancient. You think it's yours, but it's not. It's your mother's heartbreak, your father's silence, your grandparents' survival instincts echoing in your nervous system like ghosts you didn't invite, but can't seem to exorcise. Imagine a person who spends years trying to build confidence, only to find themselves repeatedly shrinking in moments of confrontation, unable to stand tall. They look outward for answers, but the roots are inward, tangled in the soil of their childhood. Toxic family patterns are not always loud or obvious. They are often subtle, masked as love, tradition, or duty. They're the things we dismiss as just how it is, the dynamics we normalize until they become the script of our inner world. These patterns are inherited, but they are not fate. The first toxic pattern is emotional invisibility, when your feelings were never acknowledged, mirrored, or welcomed. When we grow up in families where emotions are seen as weaknesses or burdens, we learn to suppress them. We become emotionally numb, disconnected from our own truth. And this numbing becomes fertile ground for inner demons to take root. You may now struggle to recognize what you feel, or worse, distrust your own emotions. And if you can't trust your feelings, how can you trust your intuition? Let me ask you something powerful. What if the reason you can't find clarity in your life is because your emotional compass was broken before you ever had a chance to use it? Emotional invisibility creates adults who second-guess everything, who seek external validation because their internal world was never validated. It births anxiety, indecision, and a desperate hunger for connection that often leads to toxic relationships. Healing begins when we allow ourselves to feel fully, to name our emotions without shame, and to honor them as sacred data from our soul. The second toxic pattern is conditional love, a love that had strings attached, standards to meet, hoops to jump through. You had to be a certain way to be accepted, to be celebrated. Maybe you had to be the achiever, the caretaker, the peacemaker. And so you lost your authenticity to win someone else's approval. Now you may find yourself shape-shifting in relationships, fearing rejection, and carrying a deep, unspoken belief that who you truly are is not enough. This pattern creates inner demons of perfectionism, people-pleasing, and chronic self-abandonment. You're exhausted, but you don't know why. You say yes when you mean no. You laugh when you want to cry. You shrink when your soul wants to roar. But here's the truth. Unconditional love is not a myth, it's a birthright. And you begin to reclaim it not by demanding it from others, but by giving it to yourself radically, unapologetically, and consistently.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The third pattern is generational silence, a culture of secrets, of things swept under the rug, of pain never spoken about. You grew up sensing things that were never explained, the tension in the room, the anger behind the smiles, the grief no one dared to name. This silence becomes a poison. It teaches you to distrust your perceptions, to ignore your gut, to question your reality. And that disconnection from truth births inner demons of confusion, dissociation, and self-doubt. We cannot heal what we cannot name. And so many of us are carrying unspoken traumas, not just from our own experiences, but from generations before us. Imagine the stories buried in your bloodline, the wars, the betrayals, the losses, the shame. They live in your body, in your bones. But you have the power to break the silence, to ask the questions, to feel the feelings, to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Now let me ask you something that may shake you. What if the emotional chaos you feel inside is not a flaw, but a signal, a sacred invitation to heal what your ancestors could not? You are the pivot point, the one who sees, the one who feels, the one who dares to break the cycle. And that's not a burden, it's a divine assignment. The fourth toxic pattern is parentification, when you were forced to become the parent before you were ready. Maybe you had to care for younger siblings, manage the emotions of your caregivers, or be the emotional rock in a chaotic household. You became hyper-responsible, hyper-independent, and now you struggle to receive. You don't trust others to take care of you. You equate vulnerability with danger. This pattern creates inner demons of burnout, loneliness, and emotional isolation. You may be admired for how strong you are, but inside you're starving for softness, for someone to hold you, to see you, to say, you don't have to carry it all. But those words never came, did they? So you built walls instead of boundaries. You wore armor instead of asking for arms to hold you. Healing begins when you grieve the childhood you never got to have and allow yourself to be nurtured now. The fifth toxic pattern is emotional enmeshment, when your boundaries were never respected because your identity was never separate. Your family may have called it closeness or loyalty, but it was actually control. You weren't allowed to have your own opinions, your own space, your own path. Love was used as leverage. Guilt was the currency. And freedom came at the cost of betrayal. This pattern creates inner demons of guilt, fear of separation, and identity confusion. You may struggle to make decisions without feeling like you're abandoning someone. You may feel selfish for prioritizing your needs. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be someone else's emotional crutch. You were meant to be sovereign. Healing begins when you realize that loving someone does not mean losing yourself. The sixth toxic pattern is intergenerational trauma, the pain that gets passed down not just through stories, but through nervous systems. If your family lived through oppression, war, loss, addiction, or poverty, that energy lives in your body. It shows up as hypervigilance, as scarcity thinking, as fear of joy. You may not know why you flinch at touch, why you sabotage success, why you expect the worst. But your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. We inherit more than eye color and genetics. We inherit pain, but we also inherit resilience. You are not just the product of trauma, you are the response. You are the healer, the alchemist, the one who turns survival into sacredness. That begins by listening to your body, tending to your nervous system, and creating safety where there once was fear. And the seventh toxic pattern is perhaps the most invisible of all: spiritual suppression, when your inner light was dimmed by dogma, by fear, by cultural conditioning. Maybe you were taught that intuition was dangerous, that questioning was rebellion, that your soul's voice was wrong. And so you buried your spiritual gifts. You silenced your knowing. You conformed to survive, but your soul never forgot. That quiet whisper that says, "There's more," is not your imagination, it's your essence trying to rise. And when we suppress spirit, we become spiritually starved. We chase fulfillment in all the wrong places. We try to earn love that is already within us. Healing begins when we reclaim our right to connect with the divine on our own terms, with no permission, no shame, no fear. So I ask you now, what patterns are you still carrying that were never yours to begin with? What stories have you inherited that need to be rewritten? What demons are you feeding with your silence, your denial, your self-abandonment? This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Because awareness is the beginning of liberation. These patterns are not your fault, but healing them is your responsibility. Not just for you, but for everyone who comes after you. You are the one who breaks the chain, who opens the door, who turns the wound into wisdom. And that is the deepest form of spiritual mastery. Part 2, the mirror of the bloodline. Seeing the shadows that shaped When you begin to look deeply into your family, into the way they spoke, the way they loved, the way they suffered, you begin to see that your inner world is not only made of your own decisions, it's made of echoes. Echoes of voices that told you what was acceptable to feel. Echoes of glances that punished your truth before you had words for it. Echoes of energy so subtle, so insidious, that you never realized it was shaping your identity. The family becomes a mirror, but the reflection is distorted until we learn to see it for what it truly is. One of the most spiritually dangerous things we can do is pretend that our family was perfect, that they meant well, and so the damage doesn't count. That because they did their best, we shouldn't feel the pain. But the soul doesn't heal through rationalizations. It heals through truth, through the raw, uncomfortable honesty of what was missing, of what was broken, and of what was never spoken. Many of us were raised to protect the family image at the cost of our own authenticity. We were taught to shut up, smile, and not make waves. We were taught that love means silence, that respect means obedience, and that belonging means betrayal of self. This creates a spiritual fracture, a split between who we are and who we were allowed to be. And that split becomes the birthplace of our inner demons. Have you ever wondered why you can't speak up for yourself, even when everything in you is screaming to do so? Why you shrink around certain people, or feel guilt for having boundaries? It's because your nervous system is still wired for survival in a family system that punished truth. You're not broken, you're conditioned. And healing is not about fixing that. It's about remembering who you were before the conditioning began. Let us return to the pattern of emotional invisibility. How many times in your childhood did you cry and no one noticed? Or worse, how many times did they notice, but mocked it, dismissed it, punished it? That moment doesn't just pass. It imprints. It tells your inner child, your feelings are dangerous. Hide them. And so you did. But those feelings didn't die. They became shadows. They became anxiety, depression, rage, addiction. They became the demons that whisper, "You are too much," every time you feel anything real. And conditional love, that's a cage so many of us still live in. We learn to perform for love, to earn it through grades, through compliance, through being the good one. And now, as adults, we continue the performance. We dress it up as success, as achievement, as being needed. But underneath, the question still haunts us. If I stopped performing, would anyone still love me? That is the wound. And the demon it births is self-rejection, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always afraid that if the mask falls, love will disappear with it. Generational silence is a spell that says, don't speak, don't remember, don't feel. And yet the soul must speak. It must remember. It must feel. That's why the silence begins to crack as we awaken. Memories resurface. Dreams become vivid. Our body starts to tremble without knowing why. That's not dysfunction, it's resurrection. The soul is trying to bring the truth back to the surface so it can finally be transformed into wisdom. But transformation requires courage. To look into the family mirror without flinching. To say, yes, this happened. And yes, it hurt. And yes, it lives in me. That is not weakness. That is alchemy. Because when we name the wound, we reclaim the power it took from us. We stop repeating what hurt us and start rewriting what heals us. Parentification is often praised in our society. You're so mature for your age. You're so strong. You're so responsible. But what they don't see is the child who never got to be a child, who never felt safe enough to fall apart, who had to become the emotional container for everyone else's chaos. And now you don't know how to be held. You only know how to hold. You don't know how to rest. You only know how to run on empty. That's not strength, that's survival. And survival is not the same as living. To live, you must feel safe enough to receive, to admit, I'm tired, to say, I need help, to believe, I am worthy of care. And that belief must come not from others, but from the deepest part of you, the part that remembers you were never meant to carry it all alone. Emotional enmeshment is a web, a sticky, invisible web that makes you feel guilty for growing, for changing, for choosing yourself. You may still hear their voices in your head when you make a decision. That's selfish. How could you do this to us? You've changed, and yes, you have changed. Because change is what happens when you stop sacrificing your truth for someone else's comfort. But guilt is the demon that keeps you stuck. It tells you that freedom is betrayal, that boundaries are abandonment, that self-love is selfishness. And so you stay small, you stay quiet, you stay in the role they assigned you. But here's the truth. You don't owe your family your silence. You owe your soul your truth. And if your truth disrupts the family system, that's not your failure, it's your freedom. Intergenerational trauma lives in the body. It's not just a story, it's a sensation. A tightness in your chest, a fear in your gut, a tension in your shoulders that never fully goes away. You may not know why you flinch at kindness, why you expect the worst, why you can't relax when things are going well. It's because your body has been trained for danger. It has encoded survival into your muscles, your breath, your heart rate. But survival is not your destiny. Healing is. And healing begins with retraining the nervous system to feel safe in peace, safe in joy, safe in love. That's not easy. It takes time. It takes presence. It takes gentleness. But it is possible, because your body is not your enemy, it is your ally. It's been protecting you. But now, it's time to teach it something new. That the war is over, that safety is real, that love doesn't always hurt. Spiritual suppression is the final prison. When your intuition was shamed, when your curiosity was punished, when your inner light was dimmed by dogma, fear, or ridicule, you learn to disconnect from your own soul, to follow rules instead of resonance, to seek approval instead of alignment. And now your spiritual path feels confusing, fragmented, empty. But your soul never left you. It has been whispering all along, in your dreams, in your longings, in your moments of stillness. It's not too late to listen. You don't need permission from a church, a parent, or a tradition. You only need your yes to your own knowing, your yes to your own path, your yes to the divine that speaks in your own language. So I ask you now, what would your life look like if you stopped carrying what was never yours to hold? What kind of love would you allow in if you believed deep in your bones that you are worthy just as you are? What kind of choices would you make if guilt and fear were no longer pulling the strings of your soul? You are not here to preserve the patterns, you are here to transcend them. You are not here to repeat the story, you are here to rewrite it. You are not here to stay small, you are here to expand beyond recognition. But that expansion begins within, with the courage to see, with the willingness to feel, with the decision to heal. And yes, it will hurt. Healing always begins with pain, but that pain is sacred. It is the fire that burns the illusion. It is the storm that clears the path. It is the voice of your soul saying, I'm still here. I've always been here. Let me lead now. Part 3. Breaking the blood spell, becoming the healer of your lineage. There is a moment in every deep healing journey when we finally stop asking what is wrong with us and begin asking what happened to us. It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Because once we realize our inner demons are often born from inherited patterns, the shame begins to melt. We stop seeing ourselves as broken and start seeing ourselves as brave. Brave for surviving, brave for feeling, brave for daring to heal what generations before us could not. The truth is, most of our family systems were built on survival, not love. They were shaped by scarcity, fear, colonization, war, oppression, and silence. Our parents were taught by their parents who were taught by theirs. And if we look closely, we'll see the patterns didn't start with them. They're older than memory, older than language. We are not just healing for ourselves, we are healing for the entire bloodline. And when you heal, you don't just free yourself, you free everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after you. But healing isn't poetic, it's messy. It requires us to confront the sacred wound, to look at the people we love and say, I love you, but this was not okay. It takes enormous spiritual maturity to hold both truth and compassion in the same heart. To see your parents not as villains or saints, but as wounded children in grown-up bodies. It means feeling grief not just for what happened, but for what never did, for the hugs you didn't get, the apologies that never came, the words you needed to hear but never. And that grief, that's not weakness, that's the doorway. Every tear you cry for your inner child creates space for something new to bloom. But you must let yourself feel it. You must stop minimizing it. Stop rationalizing it. Stop saying it wasn't that bad. If your soul still remembers, it mattered. And if it mattered, it deserves your attention. Let's talk about what happens when we begin to break these toxic patterns. First, you will feel more alone than ever, because you are stepping out of the matrix, out of the spell, out of the trance that says, this is just how families are. You will question everything, your beliefs, your loyalties, your identity. You may feel guilt. You may feel betrayal. But that is the echo of the old system trying to pull you back. Don't go back. You are not betraying your family by healing, you are redeeming them. When you stop playing your assigned role, be it the peacemaker, the hero, the scapegoat, the invisible one, the system will try to correct you. It will push back. It will accuse you. It will guilt trip you. But that resistance is proof that you're doing something powerful, something new, something sacred. Because dysfunction thrives in silence and repetition. Healing begins with disruption. And yes, you may lose connection with some family members. That is the cost of truth. But you will gain something far more valuable: yourself, your voice, your freedom, your clarity. And eventually you will attract a new kind of family, not always by blood, but by bond. People who see you, honor you, and walk with you in truth. One of the most important things you can do on this journey is create rituals of release. This could be writing letters you never send, speaking to your ancestors in meditation, creating altars of remembrance, crying the tears your lineage never allowed. These acts are not just symbolic, they are spiritual surgery. They cut the cords, they cleanse the blood, they clear the energy. You must also learn how to speak your truth with power and peace, not to blame, but to liberate. Not to shame, but to clarify. Your voice is a tool of transformation. When you say, this hurt me, you're not being dramatic, you're being divine. When you say, I need space to heal, you're not being selfish, you're being sovereign. And when you say, I choose to break this pattern, you are becoming the healer your family prayed for without knowing they did. Inner demons don't just disappear with love and light. They dissolve through integration, through looking them in the eyes and saying, I see you. I know where you came from, but I no longer need you to protect me, because that's all they ever were, protection. Rage was protecting you from powerlessness. Numbness was protecting you from overwhelm. People-pleasing was protecting you from abandonment. The demons were never evil, they were misplaced guardians. And now, you are safe enough to release them. But safety isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. You must learn to create emotional safety for yourself daily, through breath, through boundaries, through being honest with how you feel. You must reparent the parts of you that were neglected. You must become the mother and father your inner child never had. Speak to yourself with tenderness. Hold yourself when you shake. Validate your own truth. This is the foundation of spiritual sovereignty. And as you heal, something miraculous happens. You gain vision. You begin to see what others cannot. You see the trauma behind the anger, the fear behind the control, the longing behind the manipulation, and you no longer need to take it personally. You no longer need to fix them. You simply hold your frequency. You become an anchor of truth in a sea of unconsciousness. This is not easy work. It is sacred work. It is warrior work. And sometimes you will want to give up. You will feel like it's too much. You will wonder if it's even worth it. But let me tell you this, every pattern you break is a blessing for the unborn. Every truth you speak heals 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. Every boundary you set becomes a blueprint for a new world. You were not born to suffer under the weight of your lineage. You were born to liberate it. You are the prayer your ancestors whispered in secret, the light they could not reach, the clarity they didn't have the language for. You are not cursed, you are chosen. Chosen to break, chosen to heal, chosen to rebuild. So I ask you now, what legacy will you leave? Will you pass down the pain, or will you pass down peace? Will your children inherit your wounds or your wisdom? Will your bloodline remember you as the one who stayed silent or as the one who set everyone free? This is your moment. This is your altar. This is your offering.